Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we are going to climb into a time machine made of warm blankets and soft pillows. We'll be transported not just to ancient Egypt, but to a specific, almost heretically beautiful moment in it. You will find yourself standing on the banks of the Nile, a gentle breeze rustling the papyrus stalks, and the sun, a blazing orb in the sky, feels different. It feels more personal, more immediate. This isn't the Egypt of monumental pyramids and stoic pharaohs you know from history class. This is a fragile, unstable moment of revolution, led by a man who was both a genius and a fool, and who was so obsessed with the sun that he literally married his own daughters. A reality check for you. You probably wouldn't survive a single week in ancient Egypt. The flies, the heat, the lack of modern medicine. You wouldn't stand a chance. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes. Feel the grit of the Egyptian sand between your toes as you stand on the dusty ground of Thebes, Egypt's grand capital. The air is thick with the scent of temple incense and the murmur of thousands of prayers. You are a commoner, a nobody, and the pharaoh on the throne is Amenhotep IV. His father, Amenhotep III, had a long and prosperous reign, one of Egypt's golden ages. You remember his statues, those massive serene colossi of Memnon still standing there, staring out over the fields. He was the embodiment of tradition and stability, but his son, this new king, he's different. He's younger, maybe a bit frail, and there's a certain intensity in his eyes that feels new, unsettling. You see him in a procession, his face a long, narrow oval, his chin jutting out, a belly that seems strangely soft for a king. He doesn't look like the god kings of old. He looks, well, a little bit like a human being. A weirdly elongated human being, but a human nonetheless. His early reign is pretty standard, or so it seems. He's ruling from Thebes, making the usual offerings to the traditional gods, particularly Amun-Ra, the state god, who has become so powerful that his priests are practically running the country. But there are whispers. You hear them in the markets, in the mud brick homes you pass by. Whispers about this new pharaoh's strange fascination with the sun disk itself. Not the god Ra, who rides across the sky in his solar bark, but the physical disk of the sun, the Aten. You see it in the art he commissions, a simple disk with rays extending down, each ray ending in a tiny hand holding the Ankh, the symbol of life. It's a clean, simple, almost minimalist symbol. It's not a falcon-headed man or a sacred beetle. It's just the sun. How can the sun itself be a god? You think to yourself, scratching your head. It's a good question. The pharaoh, your pharaoh, doesn't just ponder this new theology. He embodies it. He begins to change his own name. He was Amenhotep IV. Amun is satisfied. But Amun is no longer the god of his heart. The whisper turns into a shout, and you hear the royal heralds proclaim his new name, Akhenaten, which means effective for the Aten. A name change in ancient Egypt is a big deal. More than just a fresh start, it's a complete spiritual and political rebrand. You can feel the seismic shift happening under your feet. It's not just a new name, it's a new worldview, a complete break from millennia of tradition. What's really fascinating, if you manage to avoid the dysentery long enough to think about it, is that this religious shift might have been a political power play. The priests of Amun-Ra in Thebes had grown incredibly wealthy and powerful. They owned vast tracts of land, controlled huge portions of the kingdom's wealth, and their influence was starting to rival the pharaoh himself. By elevating the Aten, a god with no established priesthood and no grand temples, Akhenaten essentially sidelined his political rivals. He didn't just create a new god, he created a new source of divine power that he, and only he, could control. It was a brilliant, if utterly reckless move. He was essentially telling the most powerful people in the kingdom, "Sorry guys, your god is old news. Mine is the only one that matters now." I can just imagine the disgruntled priest's reaction. A lot of crossed arms and disgruntled muttering. But this wasn't just about politics. There was a genuine, almost obsessive piety to Akhenaten's belief. Historians still argue whether his devotion was a calculated strategy or a deeply felt spiritual conviction. The art and the hymns he wrote to the Aten suggest a profound personal connection, a sort of poetic genius. His hymn to the Aten, a beautiful piece of poetry, describes the sun as the source of all life, the one true creator. "You are in my heart," he writes. "There is no other who knows you, save your son Akhenaten." It's a statement of absolute monotheism, a concept that's pretty wild for ancient Egypt, a place where you had a god for everything from childbirth to, well, crocodile dung sunscreen, as you may remember. This isn't just one god among many, it's the only god, and the only one who can talk to this god? The Pharaoh himself. A clever way to secure a monopoly on divine communication, if I do say so myself. So you stand there in Thebes, watching the city slowly turn. The massive temple of Amun-Ra still dominates the skyline, but you see new, smaller shrines being built, all open to the sky, all for the Aten. Akhenaten's decrees become more and more radical. He orders the names of other gods, especially Amun, to be chiselled out of inscriptions and monuments. Think about that for a second. The very act of carving a god's name out of stone is an act of spiritual violence. It's a way of saying, you don't exist anymore. This is more than a religious shift, it's a cultural lobotomy. You see scribes on the streets with hammers and chisels, and you can practically hear the scraping sound, a slow, methodical erasure of history. This new vision is consuming him. He's not content to merely tolerate the old gods, he must actively destroy their memory. You can feel the tension in the air. The priests are furious, the common people are confused, and the artisans are scrambling to keep up with the new style. Everything is in flux. The old ways are crumbling, and you're caught in the middle of it all. You're a witness to the birth of something unprecedented in the long history of the world's most stable civilization. The Pharaoh's obsession is about to get even bigger. He's about to leave Thebes entirely and build a new city from scratch, a city dedicated to this one, all-powerful, all-seeing God. And you know in your gut that this is not going to end well. It never does when someone tries to rewrite the rules from the ground up. But for now you just watch as the sun sets over the Nile, a perfect glowing disk, and for the first time in your life, you wonder if it's more than just a big ball of fire. You wonder if it's watching you back. The sun, that single blazing eye in the sky, felt different now, didn't it? Not just a source of light and warmth, but a living, breathing entity. After all the scraping and chipping and renaming, you knew something big was coming. The tension in Thebes had become unbearable, like a drum pulled too tight. The air practically crackled with the silent fury of the Amun priests. Akhenaten, your pharaoh, was a man who didn't like to be told no, and his vision was too grand to be contained within the city of his ancestors. Thebes was steeped in the old ways, its very stones consecrated to the multitude of gods he now reviled. So, he did what any good revolutionary with absolute power and unlimited resources would do. He packed up his court and announced he was building a new city. A clean slate, a blank canvas, a capital free of the old, messy, polytheistic baggage. You hear the news in the market, a rumour that quickly hardens into fact. The pharaoh has chosen a site, an uninhabited stretch of desert along the east bank of the Nile, roughly halfway between Thebes and Memphis. He named it Akhenaten, which means Horizon of the Aten, but you and everyone else just calls it Amarna, the name of a local modern village. You'll know it by one day. You can picture it, a vast empty expanse, framed by cliffs on one side and the river on the other, a place with no history, no ancestral spirits, no pre-existing temples to Amun. It was a perfect blank slate for a revolutionary to build his utopia. Akhenaten claimed the Aten itself had chosen the site. He even had boundary stelae carved into the cliffs to mark the city limits, an open declaration that this was sacred ground, consecrated by the Aten for his exclusive use. The scale of the project was staggering. You trudge with your neighbours, conscripted labourers and eager artisans alike toward this new horizon. The work begins almost immediately, a furious, desperate race against time. The city isn't built like the old ones, with slow, careful construction over decades. No, this one is erected with a manic energy, a fever dream pace. You see labourers using mud bricks, not massive stone blocks, to build the walls of the palaces and temples. This choice of material, while practical for speed, also made the city less permanent, more fragile. It was a city built for a single reign, a fleeting moment in history. Think about that for a second. The Great Pyramids were built to last for eternity. Akhenaten was built to last for a single man's lifetime. Kind of poetic in a very sad way, isn't it? The centrepiece of the city, the beating heart of this new religion, was the great temple of the Aten, It was unlike any temple you'd ever seen. It had no roof. Instead of a dimly lit sanctuary, a place where only priests and pharaohs could enter the presence of the god, this temple was open to the sky. It had countless offering altars, all exposed to the direct life-giving rays of the Aten. It was a space designed for public worship, for direct communion with the god, without the need for an intermediary. The whole thing was a physical representation of Akhenaten's belief. The Aten's light shines on everyone, and everyone can receive its divine grace. Of course, you still needed the pharaoh to get the Aten's attention, so there was still a bit of a gatekeeping situation. But still, it was a radical break from the secretive inner sanctum worship of the past. It's like switching from a secretive, members-only club to a giant outdoor rave. A very quiet, spiritual, incense-filled rave, mind you, but a rave nonetheless. You work on the palaces too, a sprawling complex for Akhenaten and his family, the official residence, the North Palace, and a ceremonial palace. You watch as artists decorate the walls with scenes that are shockingly intimate. No more stiff, formal reliefs of pharaohs smiting their enemies. Instead, you see Akhenaten and his great royal wife Nefertiti, relaxing on cushions, playing with their daughters, and even kissing. It's a completely new, frankly weird, artistic style. They're depicted with oddly elongated skulls, soft bellies, and slender limbs. Historians still argue whether this unique artistic style was a deliberate exaggeration to represent a new spiritual ideal, or if it was a genuine attempt at realism, possibly even a reflection of a real genetic condition that affected the royal family. It's a bizarre mix of the deeply personal and the highly stylized. Life in Akhenaten, for you, a commoner, is a whirlwind of activity and change. You're not just building a city, you're living in a grand experiment. Everyone you know, every priest, every soldier, every artisan, has been uprooted from their lives and brought here, to this new desert capital. The city's inhabitants are a mix of the true believers and those who just had to go where the pharaoh went. The royal road that runs through the city, the Akhenaten, is always busy, a constant flow of people, chariots, and goods. But you can feel the isolation. This city is a bubble, an oasis of heresy surrounded by a kingdom that still, for the most part, prays to Amun-Ra. It's a city built on a singular vision, and you can't help but wonder what happens when that vision fades. A quirky tidbit. To keep the city running, they needed vast quantities of food and goods, which meant a complex system of supply lines had to be maintained across the desert. A sort of ancient Egyptian FedEx system, if you will. But the city is also beautiful, in its own strange way. The sunlight, unimpeded by temple roofs, floods every space. The hymns to the Aten, composed by the king himself, are recited in the streets. You hear them, these beautiful poetic descriptions of the sun's power. When you set in the western horizon, the land is in darkness. In the manner of death, the hymns go. When you rise at dawn and fill the world with your beauty, all the cattle rest in the pastures, all the trees and herbs grow green. It's a gorgeous hymn, even if you can't quite shake the feeling that Amun-Ra is still out there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting. The speed and scale of the project were insane. In just a few years, a city of tens of thousands of people sprang up from the desert floor. It's a testament to the pharaoh's absolute power and the sheer will of a man utterly consumed by his beliefs. This was more than a new capital. It was a physical and spiritual statement, a declaration that Akhenaten was a messiah, chosen by a singular god to usher in a new era. But utopias built in such a hurry, with such a singular vision, have a tendency to crumble just as fast as they were built. A city like this, so dependent on one man, one ideology, is a house of cards. A strong wind could knock the whole thing down. You can already hear the whispers of discontent from those who miss the old gods, the familiar rituals, the comfort of knowing you have a god for every problem. So, you finish your work for the day, your hands calloused and your back aching. You walk through the dusty, half-finished streets of Akhenaten, a city that feels both grand and strangely temporary. The sun sets, the last rays of the Aten disappearing behind the western cliffs, and for a moment the city is plunged into a profound and unsettling darkness. You light a small lamp in your home, a feeble little light in the vast open-air temple of the night, and for a moment you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. But then the sun rises again the next morning, a blazing ball of fire, and the work begins anew. The new era has begun, and you, a nobody from Thebes, are a part of it, for better or for worse. You just have to hope you survive long enough to see how it ends. The mud bricks are still drying on the walls of Akhenaten, the new city, and the air still feels a bit dusty from all the furious construction. But amidst the chaos of a city being built from scratch, there is an oasis of calm, a pillar of grace and power. You see her in the royal processions, her head held high, her unique crown, a flat-topped blue headpiece, setting her apart from every queen you've ever seen. She is Nefertiti, and she is far more than just the pharaoh's wife. She's a co-star in this radical new play, a queen who stands not behind but beside her husband. Her very name, the beautiful one has come, feels like a prophecy of this new era. Nefertiti is not just beautiful, she's a political and religious force in her own right. You see her in the reliefs not just as a supporting character, but as an active participant. In scenes that would have traditionally shown the pharaoh alone making offerings to the gods, Nefertiti is there with him, shaking a sistrum, a ceremonial rattle. She is depicted as being just as devoted to the Atene as he is, perhaps even more so. In one famous relief you see her and Akhenaten together, with the sun disk of the Atene shining down on them, its rays ending in hands that offer them life. It's a powerful image, one that puts her on an almost equal footing with the pharaoh himself. This is a radical departure from the traditional image of an Egyptian queen, who was usually a more passive figure, a fertility symbol for the dynasty. Nefertiti is a revolutionary queen for a revolutionary king. Her artistic representations are iconic. The most famous is that stunning unfinished bust found in the workshop of the sculptor Thutmose. It's a masterpiece of realism and grace, with a long, elegant neck and a face that seems to hold a sense of both serene calm and deep inner thought. When you see a copy of it, maybe in the bustling art quarter of the city, you can't help but feel that you're looking at a real person, not just a stylized representation of power. But what's really interesting is that this hyper-realism extends to all of her artistic depictions. She's always shown with a graceful, almost ethereal elegance that is in stark contrast to her husband's more, shall we say, stylized appearance. Akhenaten's portraits often have that famous elongated jaw, soft belly and wider hips, a look that has spawned 1,000 scholarly debates. Nefertiti's depictions, however, are a study in perfect classic beauty. It's a fascinating dichotomy, a quirky tidbit. Some art historians believe the famous bust was actually a practice piece, a model for a future statue, which might explain why it's so realistic and in such pristine condition. It was a sculptor's reference guide. Nefertiti's influence extends beyond the artistic. She is given titles of power and prestige that were unheard of for a queen. She's called Lady of all women, Mistress of Upper and Lower Egypt, and Great King's wife. But she's also depicted with titles that were usually reserved for the pharaoh, such as She of the Two Lands and the One Who Pleases the Aten. Historians still argue whether her status was a true reflection of her power or just a ceremonial elevation to support her husband's new religious vision. Whatever the case, she was an integral part of the political machine. It's easy to think of her as just a pretty face in a funny hat, but she was a powerful figure in her own right, a co-ruler in a sense. She was the yin to his yang, the beauty and grace to his slightly unhinged genius. You see her with him in the royal chariot, her hand on his arm as they ride through the streets of Akhenaten. You notice how the people don't just bow to him, they bow to her as well. She is the public face of the royal family, the calm and collected presence that reassures the populace. Her image is everywhere, on temple walls, on small altars in private homes, on relief carvings that show her receiving offerings from her husband. She's a living goddess, a high priestess of the Aten, and a symbol of the new era. Her power is a mainstream historical fact that is impossible to miss. Her image is a constant reminder that this religious revolution is a joint project, a partnership between a king and a queen who are both utterly convinced of their divine mission. The relationship between Akhenaten and Nefertiti, as depicted in the art, is one of startling intimacy. They are shown holding hands, embracing, and playing with their children. This is a huge departure from the rigid formal art of the past, where pharaohs and queens were almost never depicted in such a casual, loving manner. This new style of art, the Amana style as we'll call it, is a complete break with tradition. It's almost voyeuristic, like you're peeking into the private life of the royal family. It suggests a relationship based on affection and partnership, not just political convenience. It's a refreshing change from the stiff, formal poses of the past. But you can't help but wonder if it's all just an elaborate form of propaganda. Is the love real, or is it just another part of the religious revolution, a way to show that even the most intimate parts of life are consecrated to the Aten? Nefertiti is also the mother of 6 royal daughters, the princesses who would soon become a key part of the family's public image. She is shown with them in scenes of domestic bliss, a mother, a wife, a queen, and a goddess all rolled into one. The daughters are a constant presence in the art, a sign of a fertile, divinely sanctioned dynasty. They are a sign that this new religious order, this new city, this new way of life is here to stay. And you see it everywhere, on every wall, on every pillar. The power couple and their gaggle of little princesses. It's a family portrait that is both a symbol of their new religion and a tool of their propaganda. And Nefertiti is at the heart of it all. She is the grace that balances her husband's strange intensity. She's the beauty that makes the weird, elongated art feel more palatable. She's the powerful queen who helps her husband navigate the treacherous waters of his religious revolution. You can feel her presence in the very stones of Akhenaten. She's a queen of her own accord, a revolutionary in a woman's body, and a partner to a pharaoh who is trying to change the world. But as you watch her, you can't help but wonder what happens to a woman who has so much power, so much influence. When the revolution starts to falter, when the tide starts to turn, when her husband's grand vision begins to crumble, what happens to the beautiful one when the sun sets for good? The city of Akhenaten is no longer a construction site. It's a living, breathing capital, a city of mud brick and sun-bleached stone teeming with life. And at the heart of it all is the royal family, a group so devoted to their new god and so committed to their public image that they are, quite literally, everywhere. The art of this new city is obsessed with them, a constant, loving portrayal of Akhenaten and Nefertiti and their gaggle of 6 daughters. You see them in the temples, on the walls of the palaces, and even on the small altars set up in private homes. This focus on the family is a radical departure from tradition. For you, a commoner, it's a peek behind the royal curtain that feels both intimate and, frankly, a little weird. You know their names by heart, for they are the living, breathing symbols of this new dynasty. First, there is Narrated, the eldest, whose name means she who is beloved of Aten. Then comes Akhenaten, behold the Aten. After her, Akhenaten, she lives for the Aten. Followed by Neferneferuten Tasherit, the beautiful one of the Aten is here, and Neferneferu, the beauty of Ra, and finally the youngest, Setepenre, chosen of Ra. You notice a quirk in the names. Most of them refer directly to the Aten, the new god, a constant reminder of the family's devotion. But the 2 youngest, Neferneferu and Setepenre, have names that reference Ra, the old sun god. It's a subtle but significant detail that has led historians to argue whether this was a deliberate choice to link the old and new religions, a sort of softening of the revolutionary fervour as the reign progressed. You see them in the art, these 6 little girls, always present, always part of the scene. They are shown with their elongated skulls and slender limbs, just like their parents. They are a constant presence, whether they are clinging to their mother's knee, being held by their father, or playing a game. In one famous relief, you see the royal family basking in the sun's rays, the hands of the Aten reaching down to caress them. It's a sweet, loving image of a family, a true family portrait. You're used to seeing pharaohs as stoic, solitary figures, but Akhenaten is a doting father, and Nefertiti a loving mother, and they are not afraid to show it. It's a very human, very vulnerable depiction that stands in stark contrast to the stiff, formal images of pharaohs past. The daughters' prominence in the public eye is a mainstream historical fact. They are not just background figures. They are an integral part of the political and religious propaganda of the Amarna period. They are the living proof that this new religion is fertile and blessed by the Aten. Their very existence is a statement. And as they grow older, their importance only increases. You watch as the eldest, Akhenaten, starts to take on a more prominent role. She's often depicted with her mother Nefertiti, and as the years go by, she's shown more and more often with her father Akhenaten in scenes of ritual and ceremony. It's clear that she's being groomed for a special role. She is the heir, the future of this dynasty, a living symbol of a new era. Her sister, Akhenaten, also plays a tragic and important role. In a series of haunting reliefs found in the royal tomb in Akhenaten, you see her on her deathbed, surrounded by her grieving family. The scenes are incredibly moving, a poignant depiction of parental grief. Akhenaten and Nefertiti are shown with their heads bowed in sorrow, their faces full of pain. It's a raw, emotional portrayal of loss that is almost unheard of in ancient Egyptian art. For a culture that was so focused on life and the afterlife, to see such a clear and honest portrayal of death is both shocking and deeply human. It's a reminder that even pharaohs and their divine queens are not immune to the tragedies of life. A little light joke, it's a lot like a super dramatic reality TV show, but with more angst and a lot less swearing. The princesses are a key part of the Amarna style, which, as you know, is all about a new kind of realism. Akhenaten and his artists threw out the old rulebook, which dictated how pharaohs and gods had to be depicted. Instead of idealised, perfect bodies, they created images that were more natural, more intimate, more personal. The elongated heads of the royal family, for example, have been the subject of countless debates. Were they a real physical trait? Maybe a genetic disorder? Or was it an artistic exaggeration to show that the royal family was different, that they were physically and spiritually unique? Historians still argue whether this unique look was an attempt at realism or just a deliberate stylistic choice, a new way to show divine power. Whatever the reason, it was a very big deal. You see them in a garden scene, the sun shining down on them, their little hands holding tiny offerings. It's a tableau of domestic bliss, a picture of a perfect family in a perfect city, under the gaze of a perfect god. But you, a commoner, a person with no direct access to the royal court, can feel the cracks in this perfect facade. The king is obsessed with his god. He is neglecting the affairs of state, the foreign policy, the military. The kingdom is starting to get a little bit wobbly, and you can see it in the whispers, the discontent, the longing for the old gods, the old ways, the old stable world you used to live in. The beautiful family portrait so lovingly rendered on every wall feels less and less like a true representation of life, and more like an elaborate, desperate piece of propaganda. The daughters, in their innocent way, are both a symbol of hope and a sign of things to come. Their presence is meant to reassure you, to tell you that this new dynasty is strong and fertile and here to stay. But the fact that they are so publicly displayed, so integral to the king's vision, makes you wonder what will happen to them if that vision fails. What happens to the princesses of a lost cause? What will their names, so full of Aten, mean when the Aten's name is chiselled from every monument? You don't know, but you can feel it coming. A change in the air, a shift in the wind. The beautiful, intimate family portrait is a fragile thing, and you can't help but feel that it might just break. The family portrait you've been watching unfold on the walls of Akhenaten, the one with the 6 beautiful princesses, feels so perfectly serene. A loving father, a devoted mother, a gaggle of little girls. It's a vision of domestic bliss in a city dedicated to a single god. But as the years go by, the eldest daughter, Akhenaten, who you know means she who is beloved of Aten, begins to take on a new and increasingly prominent role. She's no longer just a little girl in the art. She's depicted as a young woman, a figure of great importance. You see her standing side by side with her father, performing rituals and receiving offerings, her image almost as big as her mother's. It's clear that she is a central figure in the court, a living symbol of the dynasty's future. And then the whisper starts, a tremor of shock that runs through the city's populace. It's a rumour so audacious, so unprecedented that you can't quite believe it. The pharaoh, Akhenaten, has taken his own daughter as his wife. You hear it from a friend, a neighbour, a vendor in the market. The king, a divine figure who already broke every rule in the book, has just broken a new one, a deeply ingrained taboo that is sacred to all Egyptians. He has married his eldest daughter, Akhenaten. This is not a simple political marriage. This is something else entirely. While royal incest was not unheard of in ancient Egypt, pharaohs often married their sisters or cousins to keep the royal bloodline pure. A father marrying his own daughter was a different level of transgression. It was considered a forbidden union, an act that bordered on the blasphemous. A mainstream historical fact is that the marriage is not just a rumour, It is confirmed by inscriptions found on a box, on temple walls, and on other artifacts. Meritaten is given the title of Great Royal Wife, the same title held by her mother, Nefertiti. She's no longer just a princess, she's a queen. Why would he do it? Historians still argue whether this shocking union was a political move or a religious statement. The most accepted theory is that it was a desperate attempt to shore up his new dynasty and cement the purity of the Atenist faith. In Akhenaten's mind, the royal family was not just a ruling dynasty, they were the living embodiments of the Aten. To marry an outside member, to introduce a non-royal into the divine bloodline, would be to pollute the sacred lineage. By marrying his daughter, he was keeping the bloodline pure, ensuring that the next generation of rulers would be a perfect, unadulterated product of the Aten's chosen family. It was an act of extreme piety and paranoia, a radical extension of his religious fervour. It was a man saying, "My family is so sacred, so chosen by God, that we can only procreate with each other. For you, a commoner, this is mind-boggling. You've been watching the Pharaoh's grand experiment unfold, and while you've gotten used to the weird art and the single god thing, this is something else entirely. It feels like a step too far. It feels like a sign that the Pharaoh has gone mad. You can feel the unease spreading through the city, the whispers of discontent turning into grumbles. The public face of the royal family, once a serene portrait of domestic bliss, now feels twisted. A little joke, if you can still find one in this weird situation, would be that it's like a family dinner where a new person is introduced, and that new person is the daughter you've been watching grow up for years. Awkward. The situation is further complicated by the fact that Nefertiti, the beautiful and powerful queen, is still very much present. So now you have two great royal wives, a mother and a daughter. The historical record is a bit hazy here, and it's a fringe scholarly tidbit that some believe this was done to sideline Nefertiti, who may have been falling out of favour. Or perhaps it was done to elevate Meritaten to a position of power and authority, giving her a more prominent role in the religious ceremonies. Whatever the case, Nefertiti and Meritaten are both shown with the title of Great Royal Wife, a situation that is utterly without precedent in Egyptian history. The art of the Amarna period, which you know is already a bit strange, takes on an even more unsettling feel. You see Meritaten with her new title, a young woman who has been elevated from princess to queen, and you can't help but wonder what she thinks of it all. Is she a willing participant in her father's grand religious experiment? Or is she a pawn, a daughter forced into a role that is both divine and deeply unsettling? The art doesn't give you a straight answer. It just shows her with the same serene, elegant face as her mother, a silent figure in a world of turmoil. The Forbidden Union also has a profound impact on the line of succession. Meritaten has a daughter, Meritaten Tasheret, whose name means Meritaten the Younger. This little girl is a grandchild and a daughter of Akhenaten, and she is the future of this dynasty. The line of succession, once clear and orderly, is now a tangled mess, a puzzle with a few too many missing pieces. What does it mean for a child to be born of such a union? What does it mean for the future of the kingdom? You don't know. You just know that it feels wrong, a violation of the natural order of things, a final, definitive break from the past. The king is becoming more and more obsessed with his god and his family. The outside world is starting to fall apart. You hear whispers of lost territories, of diplomatic appeals for help being ignored, of a military that is neglected and a foreign policy that is non-existent. Akhenaten is so focused on his religious revolution, on his new city, on his strange family, that he has forgotten the day-to-day work of being a pharaoh. He has built a beautiful, fragile world for himself and his family, a world that is completely out of step with the rest of the kingdom. And this forbidden union, this deeply unsettling marriage, feels like a final, desperate act of a man who is losing his grip on reality. You walk through the streets of Akhenaten, a city that once felt so full of promise, and you see the art of Meritaten, now the great royal wife. You see her with her father, her husband, and you feel a sense of unease. The sun is still shining, the Aten is still in the sky, and the city is still humming with life. But the foundation of this city, this dynasty, feels shaky. You feel like a participant in a grand experiment that has gone wrong, a social experiment that has veered into something unnatural and strange, and you can't help but wonder what will happen when the sun sets on this beautiful, strange city and on the pharaoh who married his own daughter. You walk through the streets of Akhenaten, your head still spinning from the news of the Forbidden Union. The city, once a frantic construction site, is now a functioning capital, and with its completion comes a new, singular vision in art. Akhenaten's religious revolution isn't just about a new god and a new city. It's about a complete reimagining of how the divine and the royal are depicted. The old rules are out, and a new, frankly bizarre artistic style is in. And you, a citizen of this brave new world, are surrounded by it every single day. You can't escape it. It's on the walls of the palaces, the temples, and even in the small altars people have in their homes. This new style is known as the Amarna style, and it is unlike anything you've ever seen before. The old Egyptian art was all about perfection, idealism, and permanence. The pharaohs were depicted as strong, perfect figures, their bodies eternally young and flawless. Their poses were rigid, formal, and unchanging for millennia. You saw this in the Colossi of Memnon, perfectly symmetrical, serene, almost otherworldly. But in Akhenaten, the artists have thrown out this rulebook. Instead of idealized forms, they have embraced a new kind of realism, one that is both shockingly intimate and, to your eye, a little bit grotesque. Akhenaten himself is depicted with a long, thin face, an elongated skull, a narrow chest, a prominent paunch, and wide hips. His daughters have the same strange, elongated features. It's a mainstream historical fact that this radical shift in style is one of the most defining characteristics of the Amarna period. It's a complete break with thousands of years of artistic tradition. Why the change? Historians still argue whether this new style was a deliberate attempt at realism or a symbol of a deeper spiritual ideal. Was Akhenaten actually suffering from a medical condition, like Marfan syndrome or Froelich syndrome, that gave him his unique appearance? Or was this a deliberate choice by the artist to show that the pharaoh was physically different from ordinary men, a sort of alien, divine being? Maybe it was a way of representing the unique spiritual nature of the Aten, a god that was not bound by traditional forms. Whatever the reason, the effect is the same. The royal family looks both more human and less human at the same time. You see a family holding hands and playing with their children, but they are all drawn with these strangely elongated, almost cartoonish features. It's a weird mix of intimacy and weirdness. The new style also embraced movement and fluidity. The old art was static, the figures frozen in time. The new art is dynamic, full of life and motion. You see reliefs of the pharaoh and his queen riding in a chariot, the horses in a galloping motion, their cloaks fluttering in the wind. In other scenes, the family is shown in relaxed poses, sitting on cushions, holding hands and embracing. The art is full of life and joy, a stark contrast to the rigid formality of the past. It's a very personal, almost voyeuristic style. It feels like you're peeking into the private life of the royal family. A little joke here. It's like the difference between a posed school photo and a spontaneous, slightly blurry photo of your family on vacation. One is stiff and formal, the other is full of life and a little bit goofy. The use of light and shadow is also a new element. The Aten, the sun disk, is always present in the reliefs, its rays ending in tiny hands that offer the ankh, the symbol of life, to the royal family. The light of the Aten is the source of all life and beauty, and it floods every scene, every tableau. It's a visual representation of the new religious belief, a constant reminder that the Aten is the one true source of all power and life. The artists and sculptors of Akhenaten, people like the famous Thutmose, were masters of this new style. They created works that were not just beautiful, but also imbued with the pharaoh's spiritual vision. A quirky tidbit: the royal family's elongated skulls are not just a feature of their public art. The mummies that have been found, including the one believed to be Akhenaten himself, show a skull that is indeed a bit more elongated than the norm. However, this could be a result of head binding, a practice in some ancient cultures to signify high social status, or even a genetic trait that was deliberately exaggerated in the art. It's one of those tantalizing clues that leave historians with more questions than answers. It's a reminder that no matter how much we think we know about the past, there are always a few mysteries that refuse to be solved. The Amarna style is a physical representation of the entire religious revolution. By changing the art, Akhenaten was changing the way people saw the world, the gods and the pharaoh. He was saying the old ways are dead. This is the new way, this is the way of the Aten. But as you walk around the city, you see the tension between the old and the new. You see artists who are still working in the old style, trying to find a way to reconcile their skills with the new demands. You see people who are confused by the new art, who long for the stiff, perfect and familiar figures of their ancestors. The Amarna style is a powerful tool of propaganda, a way for the pharaoh to visually communicate his religious and political beliefs to a populace that is mostly illiterate. But like any powerful tool, it can also be a double-edged sword. By making the royal family so personal, so human, the art also made them vulnerable. By showing them in their intimate moments, it stripped away some of the divine mystique that had always surrounded the pharaohs. A pharaoh was meant to be a god, a distant and powerful figure. Akhenaten made himself and his family relatable, and in doing so he opened them up to a new kind of scrutiny. You look at a relief of Akhenaten and his family. The sun is shining down on them, the rays ending in tiny hands. The figures are strange and elongated, but the emotion is clear. A loving family, a devoted king. But you, a person who has seen the pharaoh's neglect of the kingdom, who has heard the whispers of discontent, can't help but feel that this is all a beautiful lie. The art is perfect, but the reality is not. This new artistic style, so full of life and emotion, is a beautiful and tragic testament to a moment in time when a single man tried to remake the world in his own image, and in doing so, created a city that was as fragile and temporary as a sandcastle. The Amarna style has settled in. The odd-looking art is now the norm. The city of Akhenaten feels like a well-oiled machine, and the Forbidden Union has passed from a shocking rumour into a strange, unsettling fact of life. Your life, and the life of everyone around you, is now governed by the whims of a pharaoh obsessed with a single, blazing god. But as Akhenaten's reign wears on, a new figure begins to rise in prominence, and it's a figure you know well. It's his eldest daughter, Narrated, now his wife and a great royal wife alongside her mother Nefertiti. The public art and records show her taking on an increasingly significant role, but what does it all mean? You see her name appearing in inscriptions not just as queen, but with titles usually reserved for the pharaoh. She is depicted with a divine headdress, and her image is sometimes shown alone, without Akhenaten. She's a powerful figure, but how powerful? This is where the historical record gets a bit murky, and where a lively scholarly debate still rages. Was Meritaten simply a very important queen, a symbolic co-ruler in a revolutionary new religion, or did she actually become co-regent, a true partner in power with her father, Akhenaten? The evidence for the co-regency theory is both tantalizing and inconclusive. On one hand, you have the depictions of her in the art, which show her taking part in rituals and ceremonies that were usually the exclusive domain of the king. You see her name inscribed in a royal cartouche, a symbol of pharaonic power, on some artifacts. You see her given titles that are far more exalted than any queen before her, and you see a fascinating bit of artistry on a tomb in Amarna, where the names of Akhenaten and a co-regent have been carved. The co-regent's name is erased, but the titles suggest it was a female. Who could it be but Meritaten? It's a compelling argument, one that paints a picture of a young woman who was not just a pawn in her father's game, but an active participant, a true partner in his divine mission. A mainstream historical fact is that the elevation of Meritaten to such a high status was unprecedented. No Egyptian queen, not even the most powerful of them, was ever given such a public, prominent role. Her public image was not just that of a wife or a mother, but of a ruler. It was a sign that Akhenaten was not just creating a new religion, but a new kind of monarchy, one that was perhaps more inclusive, more collaborative. He was, in a sense, sharing his divine power, which was a very radical thing to do for a pharaoh. Of course, he was only sharing it with a member of his own family, which brings us back to the whole Forbidden Union thing, so it's not exactly a model of democratic governance. But there are also arguments against the co-regency theory. A fringe scholarly debate suggests that her role was purely ceremonial, a symbolic elevation designed to further Akhenaten's religious agenda. Her presence in the art, according to this argument, was not a sign of real power, but a way of visually communicating the divine nature of the entire royal family. She was a living symbol, a walking piece of propaganda. The erased name in the tomb, according to this theory, could have belonged to someone else entirely. The evidence is simply not strong enough to make a definitive claim. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, with a little bit of historical ambiguity thrown in for good measure. For you, a commoner, it doesn't really matter. You just see the eldest princess, the one who married her father, now acting as if she's a pharaoh in her own right. You see her being celebrated in the streets. You see her image on the temples, and you feel a strange mix of awe and unease. The city and the royal family are becoming more and more insular, more and more removed from the day-to-day realities of the kingdom. While the pharaoh and his co-regent are busy building their perfect utopia, the rest of the kingdom is starting to fall apart. You hear whispers of a military that is neglected, of diplomatic pleas from foreign vassals for help being ignored. Akhenaten is so focused on his family and his god that he has forgotten about the rest of the world. He has created a beautiful, shining bubble, but that bubble is becoming more and more detached from reality. A little joke. It's like a boss who is so obsessed with their pet project that they forget to answer emails or, do their actual job. The co-regency, whether real or symbolic, seems to be a desperate move, a way for Akhenaten to shore up his crumbling empire. He's trying to create a seamless transition of power to ensure that his religious revolution outlives him. He's essentially saying, even after I'm gone, my legacy will continue. The Aten will still be the one true god, and my bloodline, a pure and unadulterated product of the Aten, will continue to rule. But this is a gamble, and it's one that is not paying off. The more he focuses on his religious and political experiment, the more the world outside of Akhenaten unravels. The truth is, you don't know if Meritaten is a true co-regent, or just a powerful figure in the court. You just know that she is there, a silent partner in her father's strange and radical new world. You see her on the temples, and you see the pharaoh, and you can't help but wonder what will happen when this house of cards finally collapses. The co-regency, whether real or symbolic, feels less like a sign of strength, and more like a sign of a regime that is slowly losing its grip on reality. The sun is still high in the sky, and the Aten is still in the heavens, but the horizon, which once seemed so full of promise, is starting to look a little bit dark. The whispers in Akhenaten have grown louder. The pharaoh is becoming a distant, almost spectral figure, less a king and more a reclusive visionary. His divine union with his daughter, Meritaten, and the art that shows her as a potential co-regent have done little to soothe the growing unease. The city is a masterpiece of a single radical idea, but the kingdom outside its walls is starting to fray at the edges, and then a new figure enters the scene, a shadowy, enigmatic presence that only deepens the mystery of this strange reign. You start to hear a new name whispered in the streets, Smenkhkar. He appears in the historical record with little fanfare, a new king who seems to emerge from the shadows of the court. His name is found in a few inscriptions and on a few objects, and he is sometimes shown in art alongside Akhenaten. He is given the title of co-regent, but his identity is a complete mystery. For you, a commoner, it's just another name, another new face in a court that is already confusing and insular. But for historians, Smenkkar's identity is one of the most hotly debated topics of the Amarna period. Who was he? One mainstream theory, and the one that was once most widely accepted, is that Smenkhkar was Akhenaten's younger brother. According to this theory, he was a member of the royal family who was elevated to co-regent, a way for Akhenaten to secure the line of succession. You would have seen him as a young man, a prince who was now being groomed for the throne. He would have been a traditional figure, a symbol of a possible return to the old ways, a stark contrast to his revolutionary brother. In the art, he is sometimes depicted in a more traditional style, which would have been a welcome change for you, a person who is tired of the weird, elongated portraits of the royal family. A little joke here. He was the normal brother, the one who didn't want to talk about the Aten for 12 hours straight at family dinners. But a more intriguing and frankly wilder fringe theory, one that has gained a lot of traction, is that Smenkhkar was not a man at all. This theory posits that Smenkhkar was actually Nefertiti, Akhenaten's great royal wife, who took on a new name and a male persona to rule as co-regent. The evidence for this is fascinating. In some of the artistic depictions, the figure of Smenkhkare has a very feminine look. The face is slender, the body is a bit more graceful, and some of the headdresses are similar to those worn by queens. A quirky tidbit. One of the artifacts found from this period is a tomb chapel with an inscription to the great king's wife, Neferuaten Nefertiti. But next to it, her name has been erased and replaced with the name of a pharaoh, Ankheperur, a royal name that Smenkhkar is known to have used. Was Nefertiti a female pharaoh? Did she assume a male identity to rule after Akhenaten's decline? This would have been a complete shock to you, a citizen of Akhenaten. The queen, your beautiful and powerful queen, was now a king. It's a very dramatic twist. And then there's a third theory, one that connects all the dots in a mind-bending way. It's a scholarly debate that suggests Smenkhkare was not Nefertiti, but rather Akhenaten's daughter, Meritaten. This theory is based on the idea that as Akhenaten's health declined, he elevated his eldest daughter, his wife, to the status of a king. She was already co-regent in a sense, and this was a way of making it official. This theory is supported by the fact that Meritaten's name disappears from the records around the same time that Smenkkare's appears. Was she a pharaoh in her own right, a woman who ruled Egypt at a time of great instability? It would have been a fascinating turn of events. A young woman, a pharaoh's daughter and wife, now a pharaoh herself. No matter who Smenkhkare was, his reign was short and shrouded in mystery. He appears to have ruled for only a year or two before he disappears from the historical record. The fact that he was so briefly on the throne, and that his identity is so hotly debated, shows you just how unstable the kingdom was at this time. The king, Akhenaten, was losing his grip, and the line of succession was a tangled mess of new names and strange, confusing relationships. The city of Akhenaten, a marvel of human will and divine devotion, feels like a city on the brink. For you, a citizen who is just trying to get through the day, it's just another piece of a puzzle you don't care to solve. You just know that things feel wrong. You hear less and less about the pharaoh Akhenaten, and more about this new, mysterious co-regent. You see him in the art, a young man who looks a lot like his father, but with a different, almost more traditional feel. Or maybe you just see the queen, Nefertiti, or the princess, Meritaten, dressed in pharaonic garb. You don't know who you're looking at, and you don't really care. You just want the food shortages to stop, the foreign threats to go away, and for life to get back to some semblance of normalcy. The truth is, Smenkkare's identity crisis is a reflection of the larger identity crisis of the kingdom itself. Egypt, a land of ancient tradition and predictable rhythms, is now a land of radical change and confusing names. The Aten, the one true god, is still in the sky, but his followers, the pharaoh and his court, feel less and less like divine rulers and more like a strange family that is slowly losing its collective mind. Smenkhkare, whoever he was a symptom of a sick kingdom, a brief, fleeting moment of hope and confusion that would soon be eclipsed by the darkness to come. He was a placeholder, a temporary ruler who was trying to hold a crumbling world together, and he failed. His brief reign and his mysterious identity are a testament to the fact that Akhenaten's grand experiment was not working. The sun was setting on the heretic's reign, and with it, on the city he built and the family he loved. The sun, the Aten, is still high in the sky over Akhenaten, but the warmth you once felt from its rays has been replaced by a growing chill. The city, a once shining symbol of a new era, now feels like a gilded cage. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who so radically changed the world you live in, is becoming more and more a figure of obsession and less a king of a kingdom. His focus, you've seen it with your own eyes, is entirely on his religious revolution, on his new city, and on his bizarre family. But while he is composing hymns and building temples, the world outside of his desert utopia is falling apart. You hear the whispers in the streets, the grumbling of merchants and soldiers. The neglect is starting to show, and it's a mainstream historical fact that Akhenaten's reign was a political disaster. Egypt had long been a military and diplomatic superpower. You remember hearing tales of the pharaoh's great armies, of the vast network of alliances and vassals that stretched from modern-day Sudan to Syria. But under Akhenaten, all of that started to unravel. His singular focus on the Aten meant that he had no time for the day-to-day work of being a pharaoh. He stopped engaging with foreign rulers, he neglected his military, which had once been the envy of the ancient world, and he ignored the pleas of his vassals for help. The Amarna letters, a fascinating collection of diplomatic correspondence found in the city's archives, a quirky tidbit of history you'll discover one day, paint a vivid and tragic picture of this neglect. They are letters from the rulers of various city-states in the Levant, modern-day Israel, Lebanon and Syria, to the pharaoh begging for help. They write about being attacked by marauding groups, of their lands being seized, of their cities falling. They are desperate and they are looking to the pharaoh, their supposed protector, for aid. But the letters go unanswered. The pleas for troops and money are ignored. The pharaoh is too busy with his religious revolution to care about a few far-flung vassals. One letter, a particularly poignant one from a ruler in Byblos, a city on the Lebanese coast, reads, "Give me troops, O king." The king has forgotten his servant. "Why are you silent, O king? Am I not your servant?" It's a heartbreaking cry for help from a man who is watching his world fall apart, and it's a testament to Akhenaten's stunning neglect. You can almost feel the frustration and desperation of these rulers, a frustration that would one day turn into a quiet and resentful anger. The pharaoh's inaction would have long-lasting consequences, leading to the loss of vast territories and a decline in Egypt's international prestige. This neglect was not just a foreign policy problem, it was a domestic one too. The city of Akhenaten, while beautiful, was a drain on the kingdom's resources. The temples of the old gods were closed, their vast wealth seized by the state. The priests of Amun-Ra, once the most powerful men in the kingdom, were now powerless and resentful. You see them in the streets of the city, these once proud men, now just citizens like you. Their temples in Thebes, once bustling centres of power and devotion, are now empty, silent and decaying. The pharaoh has, in effect, started a civil war of ideas, and he is winning, but at a very steep cost. The people, the commoners like you, are confused and discontent. They had a god for everything. A god for childbirth, a god for the harvest, a god for the dead. The Aten is a distant, abstract god, a single, all-encompassing force that doesn't feel personal. The old gods were a comfort, a part of the daily rhythm of life. The Aten is a dogma, a command from a king who seems to have gone mad. This theological revolution feels less like a new dawn and more like a long dark night. A scholarly debate still rages about whether the people of Egypt genuinely embraced the Atenist faith, or if they were simply forced to comply, practicing their old religions in secret. It's a very good question. Did they really believe, or were they just pretending to? Akhenaten's rule, for all its artistic and theological brilliance, was a political failure. He was so focused on the heavens that he forgot about the earth. He was so consumed by his divine mission that he neglected the very real needs of his kingdom. He was a visionary who lacked the practicality and the political acumen to make his vision last. He built a beautiful, fragile city, a sandcastle of a kingdom that would one day be swallowed by the desert. He was a king who tried to rule from a bubble, and in doing so, he allowed the rest of his world to fall apart. A little joke here. He was the kind of person who would spend 100 hours organising his spices and then forget to buy groceries. The final years of his reign are shrouded in mystery and confusion. Smenkhkare, the mysterious co-regent, appears and disappears. Meritaten, the pharaoh's daughter and wife, is elevated to a position of power, and then there is a silence. The historical record goes quiet, and you can only imagine what is happening behind the walls of the palace. The pharaoh, your pharaoh, is getting older. His health is failing. The grand experiment is coming to an end. The city he built is starting to feel less like a home and more like a prison. You see the art, the beautiful, weird art, and you can't help but feel that it's all a record of a tragedy in the making. The heretic's legacy is a complex one. He was not a fool, he was a revolutionary. He was a genius who tried to change the world. But he was also a man who was so consumed by his own ideas that he neglected his own kingdom. His legacy is one of both incredible artistic and theological innovation and profound political failure. He was a king who, in his quest for divinity, forgot to be a man, and you, a citizen of his crumbling empire, can't help but feel that you are a part of his tragic story. The sun is setting on Akhenaten's reign, and you just hope you're not left to pick up the pieces. The city of Akhenaten is no longer a bustling centre of frenetic construction. It is a city in decay. The bright colours of the reliefs are fading, the mud bricks are crumbling, and the dust is starting to reclaim the streets. The political neglect you've been feeling for years has reached a fever pitch. Diplomatic pleas from abroad go unanswered, trade routes are becoming unsafe, and the old guard, the priests of Amun-Ra, are gaining strength in the shadows, their resentment simmering like a pot of water about to boil over. The grand experiment, so full of promise at its start, feels like it is nearing a quiet, tragic end. And at the heart of it all is the pharaoh himself, Akhenaten, who you know is now in the twilight of his reign. The final years of his rule are a blur of confusion and uncertainty. The historical record, once so full of the pharaoh's declarations and edicts, becomes a whisper. You see less and less of him in the public eye. His health, you hear, is failing. The man who was once a revolutionary force of nature has become a frail and reclusive figure. He is, in a sense, a prisoner of his own creation. His new city, his new religion, and his strange insular family have consumed him. He is a king who has forgotten how to rule, a man who has traded a kingdom for a god. The family itself is a source of both comfort and confusion. Nefertiti, the beautiful and powerful queen, seems to disappear from the public record. Her name is rarely mentioned, and her images are either defaced or replaced by those of her eldest daughter Meritaten. What happened to her? Did she die? Did she fall from favour? Or, as some fringe scholarly theories suggest, did she simply adopt a new royal name and become a female pharaoh, the mysterious Smenkhkar? It's a tantalising mystery. The great royal wife, a woman who was a powerful partner in a revolution, has become a ghost, a shadow in the historical record. Meritaten, now the great royal wife and a potential co-regent, takes on an even more prominent role. She's depicted alongside her father, her name in a cartouche, her image nearly as large as his. She is the public face of the Atenist faith, a young woman who is trying to hold a crumbling world together. You see her in the processions, a silent, graceful figure, and you can't help but feel a sense of pity for her. She's a product of her father's grand vision, a princess, a wife, and now a queen of a kingdom that is slowly falling apart. She's a symbol of a dynasty that has gone from a vibrant revolutionary force to a fragile and isolated family. The whispers in the streets of Akhenaten are no longer about the new god or the new art. They're about the old gods, the gods of your ancestors. The priests of Amun are starting to reappear, their power and influence slowly reasserting itself. They are not doing this in the open. They are doing it in the shadows, in the back alleys, and in the secret rituals of their homes. They are a patient and powerful force, and they know that the Atenist experiment is a fragile thing, a temporary madness that will one day come to an end. They are waiting for their moment, and you know, with a sense of dread, that that moment is coming soon. A mainstream historical fact is that in his final years, Akhenaten's hold on power was weakening. The kingdom was in decline, and the signs of his failure were everywhere. The royal court, once a bastion of fervent belief, was now a place of uncertainty and infighting. The pharaoh's obsession with the Aten had blinded him to the realities of ruling a kingdom. He had traded a secure and prosperous empire for a strange and radical religious experiment, and the kingdom was paying the price. It's like a person who spends all their time painting a masterpiece, but forgets to eat, sleep, or pay their bills. The painting might be beautiful, but the artist is starving. The final act of Akhenaten's reign is a blur. He dies, and his reign comes to an end. The historical record is silent about the details of his death. Was it a natural death? Was it a plot by the priests of Amun? We don't know. His death is as mysterious as his life. He's a king who ruled for 17 years, and in that time he changed everything. He changed the way people saw their gods, their king, and their world. But in the end, his revolution was not a success. It was a brief, brilliant flash in the pan that would be extinguished just as quickly as it started. A quirky tidbit that adds to the mystery of his death is the discovery of a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, KV 55, which contained a sarcophagus that was originally intended for a woman, but was used for a man. The mummy inside, a male, was identified as Akhenaten through DNA analysis in later centuries, but the way his tomb was desecrated and his coffin was repurposed suggests that his death was not a peaceful one. It's an act of vengeance, a sign that the old guard was waiting for its moment to strike. A little joke here. The pharaoh who so radically remade the world couldn't even get a custom-made coffin. The sun sets on Akhenaten's reign, and with it, on the city of Akhenaten. The city that he built with such passion and fervour will soon be abandoned, a beautiful, fragile ghost town in the middle of the desert. The heretic king is dead, and his grand experiment is over. But the questions remain. What will happen to his family, to his children, to his legacy? The kingdom, now leaderless and in disarray, is in a state of turmoil. The Aten is still in the sky, but the priests of Amun-Ra are in the shadows, and they are ready to reclaim their god. And you, a citizen who has lived through this strange and tumultuous time, can only hold your breath and wait to see what happens next. The stage is set for a new pharaoh, a new era, and a complete reversal of everything you have known for the past 17 years. The sun is setting, and a new dawn is on the horizon, but you don't know if it will be a dawn of peace or a dawn of war. The air in Akhenaten is different now. The electric charge of revolutionary fervour is gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. Akhenaten, the heretic king, is dead. The city, his beautiful, strange creation, is in a state of suspended animation, a bubble of a kingdom that is about to burst. The silence after his death is deafening. No one knows what to do. The city's inhabitants, the people who were uprooted from their homes and lives to serve a new god, are left in a state of confusion. The grand experiment is over, and the pharaoh who so forcefully commanded it has passed on. And then a new king is announced, a child. His name is Tutankhaten, and you are told that he is the son of Akhenaten. He is a young boy, maybe 9 years old, and he is now the master of this crumbling empire. He's not a king in the traditional sense, he's a pawn in a larger game, a puppet whose strings are being pulled by a powerful vizier named Ay and a general named Horemheb. These two men are the real power behind the throne, and they are not Atenists. They are old-school traditionalists who have been waiting for this moment, waiting for their chance to bring the kingdom back from the brink of disaster. For you, a commoner, this feels like a moment of both relief and dread. Relief, because the Mad King is gone, and the kingdom can finally return to some semblance of normalcy. Dread, because you know that a return to normalcy means a complete and total reversal of everything you have been told to believe for the past 2 decades. The revolution is over, and the counter-revolution is about to begin. The priests of Amun-Ra, who have been lurking in the shadows, are now starting to come out into the light. You can feel their power growing, a quiet and patient force that is ready to reclaim its dominance. The young pharaoh, Tutankhaten, is at the centre of this change. He is a child, a boy who has lived his entire life in the closed-off world of Akhenaten, a world defined by a single god. But he is now being told that that world was a lie. His name, Tutankhaten, means living image of the Aten. It is a name that links him directly to his father's revolution. But the new king and his advisors are not interested in the Aten. They are interested in a return to tradition, to stability, to the old gods who have been neglected for so long. The first and most significant act of this new reign is the decision to abandon Akhenaten. The city, Akhenaten's pride and joy, is declared a place of heresy and an evil that must be purged from the land. The court and the population are ordered to pack up and leave. This is a massive, unprecedented event. The city you helped build, the one you have lived in for your adult life, is now a ghost town. You see the wagons being packed, the families leaving, the statues being dismantled. The place that was once a vibrant living city is now just a collection of mud bricks and sand. It's a sad, quiet, and deeply unsettling moment. You can't help but feel a sense of loss for the place that was, for a time, your home. The royal court, with the young pharaoh at its head, makes the long, slow journey back to Thebes, the old capital. For the priests of Amun-Ra, this is a triumphant return. For you, it is a journey of uncertainty. You are a citizen of a kingdom that has completely changed its identity. You were once a follower of the Aten, now you must be a follower of Amun-Ra. The temples that were once shut are now being reopened. The priests who were once outcasts are now the most powerful people in the kingdom. The old gods are back and they are not happy. A mainstream historical fact is that the return to Thebes and the restoration of the old gods was the central policy of Tutankhaten's early reign. It was a complete and total reversal of his father's policies. The young pharaoh is a silent figure in all of this. He is a boy, a figurehead who's being told what to do and what to believe. But you can't help but feel a sense of pathos for him. He is a king who is being forced to dismantle his father's legacy, to abandon his home, and to change his name. He's a child who is caught in the middle of a war of ideas, and he is a symbol of a dynasty that has gone from a revolutionary force to a broken and scattered family. A quirky tidbit that adds to the pathos of his situation is the fact that his name, Tutankhaten, would soon be changed to Tutankhamun, a symbolic act that would sever his ties with his father's revolution and link him directly to the old gods. His very identity is being erased, a sacrifice to the old ways. It's an act of spiritual violence, a testament to the fact that the pharaoh's grand experiment was not just a failure, but an abomination that had to be completely and utterly purged from the land. The city of Akhenaten is now a ghost town. The sun, the Aten, still shines down on its empty streets and crumbling temples, but its power is gone. The Aten is no longer the one true god. He is just another god, a forgotten deity in a pantheon that is now being restored to its former glory. The pharaoh who built this city, the man who so passionately believed in his god, has been erased from history. His legacy is one of failure and heresy. And you, a citizen who has lived through it all, can only hope that this new era, this return to the old ways, will bring some much-needed stability to a kingdom that has been torn apart by a single man's obsession. The journey back to Thebes was long and dusty. You watch as the young pharaoh, Tutankhaten, a boy no older than 10, is led from his childhood home in Akhenaten to the sprawling ancient capital of his ancestors. For the first time in years you are surrounded by the temples of the old gods, the colossal statues of Amun-Ra, and the bustling, crowded streets of a city that feels both familiar and deeply foreign. The smell of incense is different here. It's not the clean, crisp scent of the open-air temples of the Aten. It's the rich, musty and comforting aroma of 1,000 years of ritual and tradition. The counter-revolution is in full swing, and it begins with a rebrand. The young pharaoh's name is a problem. Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten, is a constant reminder of the heretic king and his failed revolution. It's a name that has to go. You hear the decree being announced in the streets, a quiet but firm command. The boy king will change his name to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. It's a simple change, just a few hieroglyphs, but it's a profound act. It is a symbolic severing of his ties to his father and a public declaration of his allegiance to the old gods. He is no longer the son of a heretic, he is a son of Amun. A mainstream historical fact is that this name change was the most powerful and public act of the early years of his reign, a gesture that was both political and spiritual. But the rebrand doesn't stop there. The entire royal court is now engaged in a feverish campaign to restore the old order. The priests of Amun-Ra are reinstated in their temples, their power and wealth restored. The closed temples of the old gods are reopened, their statues are consecrated and their rituals are re-established. The names of the old gods, which were so carefully and viciously chiselled from monuments and walls, are now being recarved. You can hear the sounds of chisels on stone once again, but this time it's a sound of restoration, not destruction. It's like a person who has spent a decade painting a room white, and now they are frantically trying to restore the original complex wallpaper. Tutankhamun, the new king, is a figurehead in all of this. He is a child, a king who is being told what to do and how to act by his powerful advisors. But you can't help but feel a sense of pity for him. He is a boy who is being forced to dismantle his father's legacy, to reject the god he was raised to believe in, and to become a king he was not born to be. His very identity is being erased, a sacrifice to the old ways. He is a living, breathing symbol of the counter-revolution, a boy who has to publicly denounce the man he called his father. It's a tragic and lonely position to be in. The art of this new era also reflects the change. The strange, elongated and intimate Amarna style is out, and the traditional, idealised and stoic art of the Old Kingdom is back in. The pharaoh is once again depicted as a powerful, flawless figure, a god-king who smites his enemies and makes offerings to the gods. The new art is a complete return to the old style, a visual declaration that the past 20 years were a mistake, a temporary madness that has now been corrected. There's a little joke in it, a bit of sarcasm, as if the new art is saying, "See? We're back to normal, everything is fine. No one went crazy for 2 decades. Nope, not at all." A quirky tidbit that adds to the tragedy of Tutankhamun's life is his marriage to his half-sister, Akhenaten, a daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. She was a child, a princess who had lived her entire life in Akhenaten, and her name, Akhenaten, means she lives for the Aten. But she too would be forced to change her name to Akhenaten. She lives for Amun. It's a sad story of a girl who, like her husband, was forced to denounce her family, her god, and her past for the sake of political expediency. She was a queen who was given a new name and a new identity, a final, sad chapter in the story of Akhenaten's forbidden family. Historians still argue whether the return to the old ways was a genuine desire of the people, or if it was a political maneuver by the powerful priests of Amun-Ra. Did the populace truly yearn for the old gods, or were they just tired of the instability and willing to accept any change that brought a bit of peace? It's a good question. It's easy to see the counter-revolution as a triumphant return of tradition, but it could just as easily be seen as a power grab by a group of priests who had been sidelined for too long. Tutankhamun, the boy king, rules for a few short years, a period of transition and restoration. He is a silent figure, a boy who is the master of a kingdom he doesn't understand. He dies young, and his death is a mystery. But his legacy is not one of his own making. It is a legacy of his father's failure and his advisor's success. He is the forgotten king, a pharaoh who was so completely erased from history that he would not be rediscovered for thousands of years. But his tomb, a treasure trove of gold and artifacts, would one day become the most famous archaeological discovery in history, a testament to the fact that his legacy, though short, was not without its own kind of glory. You, a citizen of this new era, can't help but feel a sense of unease. The city is back to normal, the gods are back, the king is a child. But something feels wrong. The past 20 years are being erased, chiselled from the stone, and you know, with a sense of dread, that a new king is coming, a general named Horemheb, a man who will complete the work of erasing the heretic king and his family from the annals of history. The sun is setting on the heretic's family, and you just hope you don't get caught in the shadows. The air in Thebes now feels a little less tense. The old order is back, the temples are humming with activity, and the boy king, now Tutankhamun, is a quiet, obedient figurehead. But as you watch the city return to its ancient rhythms, you can't help but wonder about the people you left behind, the family that so defined the reign of Akhenaten. The royal daughters, the 6 princesses who were so prominently displayed in the art of Akhenaten, are now a mystery. Their presence in the historical record, once so vibrant and constant, has faded to a quiet whisper. They have, in a sense, disappeared from history. The fate of Akhenaten's 6 daughters is a sad and fascinating fringe scholarly debate. The historical records are sparse, and their lives after their father's death are largely unknown. What happened to them? Did they simply fade into the shadows, a forgotten part of a disgraced dynasty? Or did they live on, their lives a quiet testament to a revolution that was not entirely erased? The truth is a little bit of both. Let's start with the eldest, Meritaten. You remember her well, the princess who became her father's wife and a queen in her own right. Her fate is a bit clearer than her sister's. She's believed to have married a mysterious pharaoh named Smenkhare, the same shadowy figure who was Akhenaten's co-regent. She's mentioned as a great royal wife on a few artifacts, but her name soon disappears from the records. She may have died shortly after her father, or she may have been quietly disposed of, a living symbol of a disgraced dynasty that had to be purged. Her fate is a testament to the fact that to be a living symbol of a revolution that failed is to be a ghost in a world that has moved on. The second daughter, Akhenaten, you remember her for her tragic death, so poignantly depicted in the art of Akhenaten's tomb in Akhenaten. She died young during her father's reign, and her death is one of the few confirmed facts about the family. She's a symbol of the fragility of the Amarna family, a young life that was cut short in a world of turmoil and change. Her death is a sad reminder that even the most powerful families are not immune to the tragedies of life. And then there is Akhenaten, the third daughter, who you know would be forced to change her name to Akhenaten. She's a well-known historical figure, a mainstream historical fact, because she married her half-brother, the boy king Tutankhamun. She was a queen of Egypt, a powerful figure in her own right, but her life was one of constant turmoil. She was born a princess of a revolutionary faith, was forced to denounce her father and her god, and then married a boy king who was a pawn in a larger political game. After Tutankhamun's death, she is believed to have ruled as queen for a time, and she famously wrote a letter to a Hittite king, asking him to send her a prince to marry, a desperate plea for help that was ultimately rejected. Her fate after this is a mystery, a tragic end to a life that was so defined by the men around her. She's a powerful and poignant symbol of a family that was both a product of a revolution and a victim of its failure. What about the other 3? Neferneferuaten Tasherit, Neferneferura, and Setepenre. Their fates are completely unknown. They appear as children in the art of Akhenaten, and then they disappear from the historical record. a sad and quiet end to the lives of 3 little girls who were born into a world of divinity and power, and who were then completely forgotten by history. A quirky tidbit is that a ring from this period was found with the name of a pharaoh, Neferneferuaten Tasherit, a name that is so close to one of the princesses that some historians believe she may have become a pharaoh for a short time, but the evidence is too thin and her fate remains a mystery. The daughter's disappearance is a testament to the systematic erasure of the Amarna period. The new king, Tutankhamun, and his advisors wanted to return to the old ways, and that meant that the heretic king and his family had to be purged from the land. The daughters, the living symbols of the heretic's faith, were a constant reminder of a time of chaos and heresy. They were a threat to the new order, and they were quietly and completely removed from the stage of history. A little joke here. They were the last remaining members of a boy band that went out of style, and they were forced to retire from the public eye. Their story is a sad one. They were born into a world that was so full of promise, a world that was being remade by a father who was a genius and a revolutionary. But that world was a fragile thing, a sandcastle that would be washed away by the tides of tradition and power. The daughters were the innocent victims of a religious and political war that was not of their own making. They were born to a pharaoh who was a visionary, and they were forgotten by history. Their story is a reminder that in the grand sweep of history, the stories of individuals are often lost, their lives a quiet footnote in a chapter that is written by the victors. The silence that now surrounds their names is a testament to the power of the counter-revolution. The priests of Amun-Ra, who so patiently waited for their moment, have now had their revenge. The heretic king is dead, his city is a ghost town, and his family has been erased from the annals of history. The sun is setting on Akhenaten's dynasty, and you, a citizen who has lived through it all, can't help but feel a sense of both relief and profound sadness. The world is back to normal, but at what cost? The last time you saw the boy king, now Tutankhamun, he was being led out of Akhenaten, leaving his childhood home and the city of his father behind. The decision to abandon the city was a quiet and firm command, but its execution was a slow, sad and methodical process. You were a witness to it all. The city, which was built with such manic energy, was now being dismantled with the same efficiency. It was a complete reversal, a final act in a tragic play that had been unfolding for nearly 2 decades. The city of Akhenaten, the beautiful horizon of the Aten, was becoming a ghost town. The abandonment was not a sudden, panicked flight. It was a planned, deliberate exodus. You watch as the royal court, the priests of the Aten, and the high officials pack up their belongings and leave for Thebes. The statues are carefully removed, the treasures are loaded onto boats, and the people, the thousands of artisans and labourers who made this city a reality, are ordered to leave. The once bustling streets of Akhenaten, which were so full of life and art, are now eerily silent. The great temple of the Aten, which was once a place of vibrant worship, now stands empty, its open-air courtyards filled with nothing but the wind and the dust of the desert. The city was not destroyed, not yet. It was simply left to the elements. The mud brick buildings, which were built for speed and not for permanence, would soon begin to crumble. The desert, which had been pushed back by the pharaoh's will, was now reclaiming its territory. The city of Akhenaten was left to die a slow and quiet death, a sad monument to a grand experiment that had failed. This is a mainstream historical fact that is easily seen in the archaeological record. The city was simply abandoned and left to decay, a tragic reminder of a forgotten era. But the abandonment of Akhenaten was more than just a logistical move. It was a symbolic one. The new rulers, the Vizier A and the General Horemheb, wanted to make a clear break with the past. The city was a symbol of Akhenaten's heresy, a place that was so infused with his radical vision that it could not be saved. It had to be purged from the land, a physical manifestation of a spiritual cleansing. The city of the heretic king had to be left to the mercy of the elements, a quiet condemnation of a man who had tried to change the world. For you, a commoner who had lived in this city for so long, this was a difficult and confusing time. You had been a part of this grand experiment, a citizen of a city that was a beacon of a new religion. You had seen the art, you had heard the hymns, and you had for a time believed in the vision. But now that vision was being dismantled before your very eyes. You were a citizen of a ghost town, a person who was being forced to abandon their home and their identity. The city that was once an oasis of heresy was now just an abandoned ruin, a tragic footnote in a history that was being rewritten. A little joke here. You probably had to find a new carpenter because the guy you used in Akhenaten was now a guy you had to pretend you didn't know back in Thebes. A fringe scholarly debate that adds a layer of intrigue to this abandonment is whether the city was truly abandoned all at once, or if the process was more gradual. Some scholars believe that a small population of die-hard Atenists may have stayed behind for a time, clinging to the hope that their god would return and their city would be restored to its former glory. But even if they did, they were a small and powerless group, a quiet voice in a world that had moved on. The city, for all intents and purposes, was a ghost town, a monument to a god who had been rejected. The city of Akhenaten, now known to you as Amarna, would one day be a treasure trove for archaeologists. Its sudden abandonment meant that many artefacts were left behind, buried in the sand, a time capsule of a lost era. The Amarna letters, a quirky tidbit you already know about, were found in a royal archive, a testament to the fact that the city was a real place, a place of power and diplomacy, and not just a madman's fever dream. The art, the statues, the remnants of homes and temples, all of it was left behind, a quiet and beautiful testament to a revolution that was not entirely erased. But for you, a person who lived through it, the city is just a memory. It is a place that you once called home, a place that was full of a strange and beautiful energy. It was a place where you saw the Pharaoh marry his own daughter, a place where you saw a new kind of art, a new kind of faith. It was a city that was born of a single man's obsession, and it died when that man did. The desert has now reclaimed its own, and the city of Akhenaten is just a forgotten ruin, a sand-swept monument to a moment of madness and brilliance. The sun sets over the ruins of Akhenaten, and you are back in Thebes, in a city that feels both ancient and new. You are a person who has lived through a revolution and a counter-revolution. You have seen a god rise and fall, and you have seen a city built and abandoned. The past 20 years are being erased from the stone, and you know, with a sense of dread, that a new era has begun, an era of tradition and restoration, an era that will not look kindly on the heretic king and his family. The ghost of Akhenaten still lingers in the air, a quiet and powerful presence that will not be so easily forgotten. But for now, you are in Thebes, and the old gods are back, and that, you know, is all that matters. The return to Thebes was a political and religious triumph for the old guard, and the city of Akhenaten, now a ghost town, was the physical manifestation of their victory. But the victory was not complete. Akhenaten, the heretic king, was still a presence, a spectre that haunted the land. His name, his image, his legacy, all of it had to be purged from the land, a complete and total damnatio memoriae, a condemnation of memory. The new rulers, the general Horemheb and the priests of Amun, were not content to simply abandon the heretic city. They wanted to erase him from the very fabric of history. The systematic erasure began with a campaign of destruction and desecration. The temples and monuments that Akhenaten had built in Thebes and throughout the kingdom were dismantled. The stone blocks, which were inscribed with the Atene's name and Akhenaten's heretical art, were used as filler for the foundations of new temples and monuments. It was a complete and total reversal, a physical act of spiritual cleansing. The stones that were once a testament to a new god were now a quiet, secret foundation for the old ones. A mainstream historical fact is that this was a deliberate and widespread campaign to erase the heretic king from history. But the erasure went even further. The king lists, the official records of the pharaohs who had ruled Egypt, were a sacred document. They were a continuous, unbroken line of succession, a testament to the stability and divine authority of the monarchy. But the new rulers simply skipped Akhenaten. His reign, and the reigns of his two successors, Smenkhkare and Tutankhamun, were completely erased. The new king, Horemheb, would claim to be the direct successor of Amenhotep III, the father of the heretic. It was a historical lobotomy, a complete and total rewriting of the past. The 20 years of Akhenaten's reign was simply declared a non-event, a moment of madness that had been corrected. For you, a commoner, this was a mind-bending experience. You had lived through this period, you had seen the pharaoh's radical changes, you had lived in his city, but now you were being told that it never happened. You were a citizen of a kingdom that was lying to itself, a country that was trying to pretend that a large chunk of its history had never existed. You were a witness to a great historical forgery, a quiet and powerful act of self-delusion. It was as if you were living in a reality that was being rewritten every single day. A little joke here. It's like a family who gets rid of all the photos of an embarrassing relative and then acts like they were never a part of the family at all. The Damnatio Memoriae was not just a political act, it was a spiritual one. The priests of Amun-Ra, who had been so patient in their waiting, were now having their revenge. The heretic king, who had tried to replace their god with a single blazing orb, was now being punished for his blasphemy. His name, his image, his legacy, all of it was being purged from the land. The Aten was not just a forgotten god. He was an evil, a heresy that had to be stamped out. The statues of Akhenaten, which were so full of strange intimate realism, were smashed. The tombs in Akhenaten, which were so lovingly carved with images of the royal family, were defaced. The heretic king's body, his final resting place, would be desecrated, a final physical act of vengeance. A fringe scholarly debate that adds a layer of complexity to this is whether the erasure was a complete and total success. While the public monuments were defaced and the king lists were rewritten, the art and the artefacts of the Amarna period were not completely destroyed. The Amarna letters, a quirky tidbit you know about, were left in the city's archives, a silent testament to a world that was forgotten. The beautiful, intimate reliefs in the tombs were not completely destroyed, but simply defaced. The heretics' ideas, while publicly condemned, were not completely purged from the minds of the people. They were a memory, a quiet and rebellious thought that would linger for generations. The Damnatio Memoriae was a powerful act, but it was not a complete and total success. The legacy of Akhenaten is a strange one. He was a king who tried to change the world, and in doing so he became a cautionary tale, a heretic whose name would be forgotten for thousands of years. But his legacy also lived on in a quiet, rebellious way. The art of the Amarna period, a style that was so personal and so beautiful, would influence the art of later dynasties. The idea of a single, all-powerful god, while publicly condemned, would linger in the minds of some, a quiet seed that would one day grow into a new religious tradition. Akhenaten's revolution was not a success, but it was not a complete failure either. It was a brief, brilliant flash that left a quiet, powerful impression on the world it left behind. You, a citizen who lived through it all, are now a part of a lie. You're a part of a kingdom that has chosen to forget. You see the dismantled stones of Akhenaten's temple being used in the foundations of the new temples, and you know that the heretic's legacy is not completely gone. It is a quiet, secret presence, a shadow that still lingers in the land. The sun is still in the sky, and the gods are back in their temples, but you know, with a sense of unease, that a part of you will always be a citizen of a city that was abandoned, a follower of a god who was rejected, and a witness to a history that was erased. The past is not gone, it is just buried, waiting to be found. The quiet of Thebes is a welcome change after the frantic chaos of Akhenaten and the solemnity of its abandonment. The city feels normal again, a place of comforting rhythms and familiar rituals. The names of the old gods are back on the monuments, the priests of Amun are back in power, and the heretic king is a distant, almost forgotten memory. But for all the public forgetting, the heretic city still stands, a quiet, abandoned ruin in the middle of the desert. And though you, a citizen, have left it behind, a part of its secret still lives on, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. This is where we fast forward thousands of years into the future, to a time when a simple archaeological discovery will rewrite everything you know about the heretic king and his strange family. Imagine you are an archaeologist, a person who digs in the dirt for a living, and you are working in the ruins of Akhenaten, the city now known to you as Amarna. It is the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the city is a treasure trove of forgotten history. The mud brick buildings have long since crumbled, but the city's secrets are buried in the sand waiting to be found. And then, a local woman, a resident of a nearby village, makes a discovery that will change the world of Egyptology forever. She finds a collection of clay tablets, small, unassuming pieces of baked earth covered in a strange wedge-shaped script. The discovery, a quirky tidbit of history you'll learn about one day, is a collection of over 380 clay tablets, written in a script called cuneiform. They are not in the Egyptian language, but in Akkadian, the international language of the time. These are the Amarna letters, the diplomatic correspondence between the pharaohs of Egypt and the rulers of other kingdoms in the Middle East. They are a treasure trove of information, a secret window into the political world of Akhenaten's reign, and a direct contradiction to the official historical record that was so carefully rewritten by his successors. For the first time, you, an Egyptian from this time, get to see what the world was really like outside the bubble of Akhenaten. The letters are a mainstream historical fact, a direct and unfiltered account of the diplomatic and political failures of Akhenaten's reign. You read letters from the rulers of Byblos, of Jerusalem, of the Hittite kingdom, all of them pleading with the pharaoh for help. They write about being attacked by marauding groups, of their cities being lost, of their lands being seized. They are desperate, and they are looking to the pharaoh, their supposed protector, for aid. But their pleas go unanswered. The letters are a testament to Akhenaten's stunning neglect, a quiet condemnation of a king who was so focused on his god that he forgot about his kingdom. The letters are also a treasure trove of personal details. You read letters from a ruler in Babylon who complains about the size of a dowry for a princess, a ruler from the kingdom of Mitanni who is upset that the Egyptian gold is not up to standard. It's an intimate and personal glimpse into the world of international diplomacy, a world that was so much more complex and human than the official sanitized record. A little joke here, it's like reading a bunch of ancient emails between world leaders, full of passive-aggressive complaints and requests for money. The discovery of the Amarna letters completely rewrote our understanding of the Amarna period. It was no longer just a weird, heretical blip in Egyptian history. It was a real time, a time of political and diplomatic turmoil that had a profound impact on the rest of the world. The letters are a testament to the fact that the heretic's reign was not a non-event. It was a real and consequential period in history, a time of both incredible innovation and profound failure. The Amarna hoard, as it would be known, also included other artefacts, small personal objects that were left behind in the hasty abandonment. The famous bust of Nefertiti, which you saw in the sculptor's workshop, was found in a pile of rubble. The beautiful, intimate reliefs and statues that you saw in the palaces were left behind, buried in the sand. The city of Akhenaten, which was meant to be erased from history, became a time capsule, a museum of a lost era. Historians still argue whether the discovery of the Amarna letters was a complete revelation, or if the letters were just confirming what we already suspected. Did the people of the time know about Akhenaten's political failures, or were they just as clueless as we were? Is a very good question. The letters are a direct and unfiltered account of the truth, a truth that was so carefully and deliberately erased from the official record. They are a testament to the fact that no matter how hard you try to bury the truth, it will always, eventually, come back to haunt you. The city of Akhenaten, this oasis of heresy, was not a complete failure. It was a place where art and religion and politics all collided in a fascinating and tragic way. And its secrets, the secrets that were buried in the sand for thousands of years, would one day be revealed. The letters are a quiet, powerful testament to a king who tried to change the world, a king who failed, but a king whose legacy would not be so easily forgotten. The sun, the Aten, still shines down on the ruins of Akhenaten, but its secrets are now out, and they are here to stay. The secrets of Akhenaten, once buried in the sand, are now starting to come to light. The Amarna letters, a silent testament to a world that was forgotten, have been found, and the ghost of the heretic king is starting to reappear. But for all the discoveries, one of the biggest mysteries remains unsolved: the final resting place of Akhenaten. The king who so radically changed the world you live in disappeared without a trace, and his tomb, the one that should have been a monument to his greatness, has never been definitively found. It is a quiet and powerful mystery that has captivated archaeologists for centuries. You know that the pharaohs of Egypt were buried in grand, elaborate tombs in the Valley of the Kings. These tombs were meant to last for eternity, a final, sacred resting place for the body of a god-king. But Akhenaten, the heretic king, was different. He had his own tomb built in the cliffs of Akhenaten, a place that was meant to be a final resting place for him and his family. The tomb was a beautiful and unique creation, a place where his family was depicted in intimate scenes of grief and sorrow. But the tomb was never completed, and it was never fully occupied. The historical record is silent about the details of his death and burial. Did he die in Akhenaten? Was he buried in his tomb only to be moved later? Or was his body desecrated, a final act of vengeance by the priests of Amun-Ra? The truth is a fascinating and maddening mystery, a puzzle with a few too many missing pieces. The search for Akhenaten's tomb has been a long and frustrating one. The tomb in Akhenaten, which was meant for him and his family, was found to be incomplete and empty. It was a beautiful but sad monument to a king who never got to be buried in his final resting place. And then, a series of tantalizing clues would lead archaeologists to the Valley of the Kings, the old burial grounds of the pharaohs. A tomb, known as K4 55, was discovered. It was a small, unassuming tomb that was clearly a makeshift burial place. But inside, archaeologists found a sarcophagus that had been repurposed from a woman's coffin to a man's, and the mummy inside was a male of a similar age to Akhenaten. The tomb was a mess. The objects inside had been broken and defaced, and the mummy was in a state of decay. For a long time, historians believed that this was the tomb of Akhenaten, that his body had been moved from Akhenaten and placed in a makeshift tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a final public act of humiliation by his enemies. The desecration of the tomb, the broken objects, and the defaced sarcophagus all pointed to an act of vengeance, a final act of damnatio memoriae against the heretic king. It was a mainstream historical fact that this was the most likely resting place of Akhenaten, a tragic end to a tragic life. But a fringe scholarly debate adds a new layer to this mystery. What if the tomb was not his? What if it belonged to his son, the mysterious Smenkhkare, the one who so briefly ruled after his death? The age of the mummy was a good fit for Akhenaten, but it was also a good fit for Smenkhkare. The art and the artefacts in the tomb were a jumbled mess of names and symbols, a clear sign of a period of great confusion and upheaval. The tomb was a puzzle that refused to be solved, and for a long time, the identity of the mummy remained a mystery. A quirky tidbit that adds to this mystery is the fact that the objects in the tomb were not all from the same period. There were objects from the reign of Akhenaten, objects from the reign of Tutankhamun, and objects from the reign of other pharaohs. The tomb was a hot mess, a sign of a kingdom that was in a state of turmoil. It was a quiet and powerful testament to a time of great confusion, a time when a king died and his kingdom was left without a leader. The discovery of the tomb K55, whether it belonged to Akhenaten or Smenkhkare, was a turning point in the study of the Amarna period. It was a physical and spiritual link to a dynasty that was so deliberately erased from history. It was a reminder that the damnatio memoriae, for all its power, was not a complete success. The truth, in the form of a desecrated mummy and a jumbled collection of objects, was still out there, waiting to be found. A little joke here. The pharaoh who so radically changed the world couldn't even get a peaceful burial, a final quiet act of revenge by the priests of Amun. The search for Akhenaten's tomb continues to this day. There are some who believe that his body was never moved from Akhenaten, and that a more elaborate, well-hidden tomb is still out there waiting to be found. Others believe that his body was completely destroyed, a final, definitive act of spiritual cleansing. The truth is a quiet, powerful mystery that adds to the allure of a king who was both a genius and a fool, a man who so completely changed the world that he was erased from history, only to be found again, a quiet, mysterious presence that still haunts the land of Egypt. The sun sets over the Valley of the Kings, and you, a citizen who has lived through it all, can't help but feel a sense of both profound sadness and quiet awe. The heretic king, the man who so captivated you and the world, is gone. His city is a ruin, his family is a memory, and his tomb is a mystery. But his legacy, a legacy of art, religion, and political failure, still lives on. It is a quiet and powerful testament to a moment in time when a single man tried to change the world, and in doing so, became a legend. The mysteries of the Amarna period, once buried under sand and silence, are now starting to give up their secrets. We've unearthed the city, deciphered the letters, and found the tomb of a pharaoh whose identity is still hotly debated. But the biggest mystery of all, the identity of the king who so completely changed the world, remains. Was the mummy in Tomb 55 really Akhenaten? Was his mysterious co-regent Smenkhkare a man or a woman? And what about the enigmatic figure of Tutankhamun, the boy king who was forced to denounce his father's legacy? In the modern era, you will find that these questions are no longer just the domain of archaeologists and historians. They are now in the hands of scientists, people who can use the tools of the future like DNA analysis to unravel the mysteries of the past. The first and most important step in this modern quest was to identify the pharaohs and their families. It was a groundbreaking mainstream historical fact when a team of Egyptian researchers in 2010 announced the results of a DNA study on a number of royal mummies. The team took samples from the mummies of Tutankhamun and the mummy from tomb KV55, the one believed to be either Akhenaten or Smenkhare, and what they found was a staggering revelation. The mummy from KV55 was the father of Tutankhamun. It was a direct, irrefutable link that proved that the pharaoh from KV55 was, without a doubt, the heretic king himself, Akhenaten. For a long time, historians had debated whether Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The DNA evidence proved that he was the son of Akhenaten, but the mother was a different story. The DNA analysis showed that the mother of Tutankhamun was a mysterious mummy from a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a mummy known only as the Younger Lady. The DNA also revealed a startling and unsettling truth. The mother of Tutankhamun was also the sister of Akhenaten. The boy king was a product of a forbidden union, not just a father-son relationship, but a brother-sister one. This added a tragic and powerful layer to the story of the Amarna family, a royal line that was so obsessed with the purity of its blood that it resorted to inbreeding, a practice that likely led to the genetic deformities that you saw in the art. A quiet and powerful testament to a family that was both divine and deeply, tragically human. The DNA analysis also shed light on the mysterious figure of Smenkhare. The DNA showed that he was a man, a brother of Tutankhamun, but the analysis was not able to definitively link him to Akhenaten, so his identity remains a mystery, a fringe scholarly debate that still rages on. Was he a son of Akhenaten and a secondary wife? Was he the son of a different branch of the royal family? The DNA analysis, for all its power, left some questions unanswered, a quiet and powerful reminder that the past will always, eventually, hold on to a few of its secrets. The DNA evidence also helped to solve a few other mysteries. It helped to identify the mummy of Yuya, the father of Queen Tiye, who was the wife of Amenhotep III and the mother of Akhenaten. It also helped to identify the mummy of Amenhotep III himself. For the first time, you, a person who lived in this time, could see the family tree of the heretic king laid out in a way that was never before possible. It was a family of inbreeding, of power, of tragedy, and of a strange and beautiful faith that was so completely and utterly tied to its own sense of divinity. A quirky tidbit that adds to this story is the fact that the DNA analysis also helped to confirm the identity of Tutankhamun's parents and grandparents. But it also showed that the family was plagued by genetic deformities and illnesses. Tutankhamun himself suffered from a number of health problems, including a cleft palate and a clubfoot, a quiet and powerful testament to the dangers of inbreeding, a tragic end to a family that was so obsessed with its own divinity that it forgot to be human. The DNA debates are a powerful and modern testament to the enduring power of the Amarna period. It is a period of history that has been so thoroughly erased and rewritten that we are still trying to understand it today. Akhenaten, the heretic king, was a man who tried to change the world, a man who failed, but a man whose legacy still lives on. His story is a story of a family that was both a product of a revolution and a victim of its failure. It is a story of a king who was so obsessed with his god that he lost his kingdom, and it is a story of a dynasty that was so obsessed with its own divinity that it lost its humanity. The final act of the story of Akhenaten is not one of vengeance or tragedy. It is one of quiet revelation. The tools of the future, the DNA analysis and the archaeological discoveries, have allowed us to peer into the past in a way that was never before possible. We can see the family tree, the genetic deformities, and the forbidden unions that were at the heart of this strange and beautiful dynasty. Akhenaten is no longer a heretic or a madman. He is a man, a father, a husband, a brother, and a pharaoh who was so completely and utterly devoted to his vision that he lost his kingdom. Now, as the sun sets and the air cools, let's leave the dusty plains of ancient Egypt behind. The story of Akhenaten is one of a king who tried to change the world, a man who built a city and a family that were as unique and as strange as his beliefs. His legacy is one of a beautiful and tragic failure, a quiet and powerful reminder that even the most powerful kings are just as mortal as the rest of us. His city is now a ruin, his family is a mystery, and his tomb is a puzzle. But his story, the story of the Pharaoh who married his daughters, is a quiet and powerful presence that will live on forever. And with that, we come to the end of our journey. The world we've explored tonight is a place of shadows and secrets, of brilliant art and tragic failure. It's a world that was both a product of a single man's genius and a victim of his obsession. The story of Akhenaten is a quiet and powerful one, a story of a king who tried to change the world, and in doing so, became a legend. But now, it's time to leave the dusty plains of ancient Egypt behind. The air in your room is still, and the hum of your fan is a soft, gentle rhythm. The world you've been imagining is fading. The colours are softening and the images are blurring. The story is over, and the time for sleep has come. You're no longer a citizen of a heretic city or a witness to a great historical forgery. You're just a person, safe and warm in your bed, with the echoes of a story in your mind. The Pharaoh who married his daughters, the city that was abandoned, the family that was erased, all of it is just a memory, a soft, quiet presence that will not disturb your dreams. The past is a quiet thing, a gentle story that will wait for you when you're ready to hear it again. For now, it's time to rest. Your journey is over.